Sometimes people ask, like, well, what if Ark and Spark and Lightning, they all started around the same time? Is Lightning just benefiting from the first mover advantage? This is like 7, 8 years ago. Something like that would have been laughed off the stage then because they're centralized and trusted. They're not solving anything. In the 7 years, 8 years since, we've had a lot of DeFi-brained people and kind of unprincipled VCs come into Bitcoin. Back then, it was the shitcoin narrative. Hey, shitcoin, not Bitcoin. This coin is better than Bitcoin because it's faster, it scales better. It does all these things better than Bitcoin. But what was the trade-off? Is that it was a far more trusted, centralized thing. And so Ark and Spark would have never competed with Lightning 7, 8 years ago. They would have just been laughed off the stage. But the shitcoin narrative, we've ground it down over time. People have realized that there's one true coin. So the same DeFi-brained, scammy VC mentality, it had to adapt. It can't shill a new shitcoin anymore. There's a million shitcoins. Here they are. They're in Bitcoin. They're not calling it a new coin. They're calling it a new L2. So it's the shitcoin scam all over again.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Around the Fire with Momo. Today I have Justin on. Thank you for coming on, Justin. Why don't you let us know about your background, how you got into Bitcoin and building on Bitcoin?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I've been building on Lightning since 2018. I was a Bitcoiner before that, kind of started to understand the means of exchange and store of value kind of separately. I was an early mover to the Free State project, which people in the US will know. The idea was kind of you have a lot of libertarians move to one area, take over the local government. And with that came like a lot of like open air market type stuff. You'd have like farmers markets where people were, buying vegetables with like grams of gold and stuff like that, which was kind of silly. I was a hard money guy before that, started to understand the Fed. That tied in with like Bitcoin as a store of value, but then seeing like these libertarian markets with people exchanging gold didn't really make a lot of sense. And I initially, started to hear about Lightning at 2017, 2018 era. And I started to see it as, okay, well, wow, like Bitcoin can be more than a store of value. It can enable those kind of circular economies, those disintermediated economies for the internet. I was working like a normal fiat job surrounded by normies. Someone asked me about Bitcoin to pay for access to a news group. That's kind of really when it clicked. You have the combination of that, using Bitcoin to pay access to online services. Lightning made that instant and nearly free. You go back to some of Satoshi's writings, like putting a few coins into a website like it's a vending machine. That's just kind of when it all clicked. And that's when I started building. I have a technical background, used to work for Microsoft. So just kind of started building on the side, kind of moving towards this, had the original ShockWallet, where we were trying to make it sort of like a decentralized open source WeChat. We used a precursor to Nostr called Gun. Same idea as Nostr. You had relays and keys. It just wasn't very performant. I was actually in contact with Fiat Joff at the time, the creator of Nostr, explaining my design, some of the issues with Gun. Nostr actually came out of that. And now today I'm full-time in Bitcoin working on these tools. We make ShockWallet. We make a node distribution called Lightning.Pub. Folks might know our video site. It's like the first Lightning video site, Lightning.Video. So we just got a couple projects. They all kind of work together. We're trying to get to that vision of this decentralized, permissionless money for the internet. And Lightning is the backbone of that.
Interesting story. And I'm very curious to talk about all the things that you were building and you are building right now. The way I got to know you was through Darthcoin. I wrote to him and I asked if he's willing to come on to talk about Spark. And he recommended you maybe he knew exactly what you thought about it. And to my surprise, your answer was, yo, I'm not in the weeds with Spark specifically, but a Lightning builder who is anti-fake L2, including Spark. Just being their scams that don't actually solve anything. And you have coined the term trustodia. So I am still open, and I am curious to know more about Spark. My knowledge of it is very limited. The first I got to know about it was a few weeks ago when I heard Seth for Privacy on Matt Odell's podcast talking about it. It got me curious, and that was when I learned that Wallet of Satoshi now uses that. He also had some criticisms about it. One of my friends created a Telegram bot for zapping each other on Telegram. It's a messaging app, very popular in the east of the world mostly. We have talked about the limitations and the fact that he, as an operator, not an operator, as kind of a runner of that server, probably is the correct word here, is able to see all of our private keys and all of course, our balances. So there are security and custody concerns about it. Anyway, I do not know much about it, and that's a let us know what you exactly think about it. Why do you consider it a fake L2? Why doesn't it deserve the label L2? Or I just kind of randomly, without any equation, talked about the limitations of it, the things that I have heard from here and there. Let us know what the issues with it are.
Sure. Yeah, so a couple things to can dissect that. Why is it a fake L2? So we have to compare it to a real L2, which is Lightning. And while it's not just Spark, there's a wave of these things. There's Ark, there's BitVM based things, there's Citria, there's drive chains. There's a whole wave of these things happening in the last couple of years that are all branding themselves as L2s. And that's piggybacking off of Lightning, because Lightning kind of coined the term L2 with regards to Bitcoin. So Lightning is an emergent thing that it inherits the physics of Bitcoin, right? So Bitcoin's value is that it's an open network. It has no central point of failure. There's no trust to get onto it or anything like that. You and I can transact in a Lightning channel without, anybody else. Lightning is a reusable chain transaction. So if I open a channel to you, that's like me making a chain transaction to you. But with Lightning, it can be reused. You can push those sats back. If you have another one, it can go through that. So that open network, that's what makes that an L2. It's inheriting Bitcoin's properties. What fake L2s do, now because Lightning has it does have UX issues, I won't deny that. But these fake L2s trying to piggyback off those UX issues, they're not really solving these problems. They want people to see these things as having affinity with Lightning. That's why they call them an L2 in the first place. You have things, Spark is a great example. That's from a company that started out as a Lightning service provider. Spark obviously invokes the electrical theme. And these things are being integrated into Lightning wallets, which are not really wallets. They're accounts for an exchange, because these things brand themselves as Lightning wallets because they integrate swaps. So if you're using Spark, your interaction with the real L2 being Lightning is through a centralized swap service that this company provides. And that's true of Ark as well. Their monetization model is to provide swaps to Lightning. So why aren't they L2s themselves? So we can see that they have a central coordinator, which makes them a closed network. Like you're invoking them to use this. So right off the bat, it's not an L2 because it's centralized in the closed network. The real L2 being Lightning, they have to affinity scan with that because it is the only L2. And so when you get to the UX problems that they're trying to address or claiming to address, There are things like receiving small amounts, receiving while you're offline, things of that nature. But they don't actually solve those. They're just rebranding trust, especially in the case of small amounts, because you're still trusting them if you can't afford to unilaterally exit, which is actually kind of the premise of what they call scaling too, is that you're deferring the cost. And if you defer the cost forever, people that can't afford the security of Bitcoin, you can't benefit from Bitcoin security unless you can afford to go to the chain for adjudication. The other side of that is, again, the swaps are trusted. So Spark and Ark and probably some of the others, they use a concept of state chains. The implementations all vary, but the result is the same. They do not change the underlying physics of Bitcoin. So when you're swapping from Lightning, let's say Cash App or something like that, there's 100 million plus phones out there today with some sort of Lightning wallet on them. If you count the exchanges, you count the Cash Apps, things of that nature. And if you're a seller of, you sell something on the internet for sats, and you're on one of these fake L2 wallets like a Spark, whoever's paying you is not paying you, they're paying Spark. They're paying the Ark coordinator. And then what you receive is a trusted swap. They're issuing an invoice. You're hoping that the invoice that they issue is actually going to credit you in some way. It's obviously trusted if the amount is too small for you to unilaterally exit. And when the state chain is the payer, it can collude with itself. The swap is the payer, and the coordinator is the second party. But really, there's the same party. So it's a completely trusted flow to get into these things, with the exception that, in Ark's case anyway, you could make an on-chain payment to an Ark, and that should be trustless and should have the same trust guarantees as Lightning if you're doing it on-chain. But if you can make it on-chain, if you can afford to make that chain payment and are willing to incur that cost up front, you could have just opened a Lightning channel. And the trade-off is that if you went into the Ark, all your future receives are going to be trusted through that swap service. So, when you combine the affinity scam nature of these things, calling themselves an L2 when they're centralized, calling themselves Lightning Network when really they're just a centralized swap that's trusted, they're not solving anything. They're just rebranding trust and centralization. That's something Lightning wallets can do. A Lightning wallet could have a trusted, centralized, zero confirmation channel LSP, and that actually is the case. I think Phoenix does that in some cases. But that, when Lightning was first getting off the ground, if these things existed today, sometimes people ask, like, well, what if Ark and Spark and Lightning, they all started around the same time? Is Lightning just benefiting from the first mover advantage? This is like 7-8 years ago. Something like that would have been laughed off the stage then, because they're centralized and trusted. They're not solving anything. In the 8 years since, we've had a lot of DeFi-brained people and kind of unprincipled VCs come into Bitcoin. Back then it was the shitcoin narrative. Hey, shitcoin, not Bitcoin. This coin is better than Bitcoin because it's faster, it scales better, it does all these things better than Bitcoin. But what was the trade-off? Is that it was a far more trusted, centralized thing. And so Ark and Spark would have never competed with Lightning 7-8 years ago. They would have just been laughed off the stage. But the shitcoin narrative, we've ground it down over time. People have realized that there's one true coin. So the same DeFi-brained, scammy VC mentality, it had to adapt. It can't shill a new shitcoin anymore. There's a million shitcoins. Here they are. They're in Bitcoin. They're not calling it a new coin. They're calling it a new L2. So it's the shitcoin scam all over again. And that's why there's a ton of these things. Like, we can't even name them all. Those Citri, Ark, Spark, BitVMX, BitVMZ, Alpin. Like, I can't even begin to name all of them. They're all calling themselves L2s. They're all centralized and adding trust and not really solving any problems.
Well, from what you explained, is that not only they do not deserve the label L2, they are not considered level at all, because they are.
They're applications.
Mhm.
They're applications. That might be a use case for them, and we're actually seeing that with
Yeah, I want
Ark.
to get into that too.
Yeah, Ark has actually been. They're probably the most bold in their scamminess. They narrative pivot like the weather changes, right? Like first it was scaling for Lightning, congestion control, like all these different narratives they stick at the wall. Most recently, in the last month, they're calling it a DeFi platform, and that could be a use case for some of these things where they already have a market or a network of buyers and sellers on, like, let's say a shitcoin exchange, like a DEX, but it's not really. DeFi we know is a scam because there's no decentralization. These things are centralized. So they can appeal to the DeFi brained people that believe that there is such a thing as DeFi, and users within an application could have some benefits exchanging with each other, but it's not an open network like Lightning is, and how Lightning inherits that from Bitcoin.
Let's talk about the limitations of Lightning. That for Lightning, I do use something like Phoenix. The problem is that the costs are higher than, sometimes even more than an on-chain transaction, especially in these days. I do not have full control, but it is self-custodial. Maybe you disagree with that, so if you do, I want to know your thoughts on that too. But it is a very plug-and-play way of having a Lightning wallet. And with, I am pretty technically minded, um, and have enough skills to run my own node. But because of the hardware problems that I currently have, my node is not running. So my Lightning node is, I cannot trust the hardware on which I am running my node to trust a Lightning node too. So I am thinking about other ways of doing it, such as Electrum's Lightning wallet. So there are so many technical difficulties with that. And in order to be able to receive, you have to open a channel. And when your channel is full, you are unable to receive coins. On-chain, you don't have these problems. And but the problem is the time it takes for it to settle, which Lightning solves. And yeah, you have to have capacity for incoming transactions, and you have to be online. And that's why, that's the reason why I cannot have my own Lightning node, because I cannot rely on my hardware. Of course, it's a fault of my hardware, but with Bitcoin wallets, the L1 wallets, you do not have this difficulty. But for scaling it, you need Lightning, and then it has some technical and practical limitations. And also, for now, I can say Lightning is more than enough. The problem is that not enough people are using Lightning, not that all the people on Bitcoin cannot use Lightning. That's probably true. In the future, for 1 billion people, more than 1 billion people, it's really impractical to have to open Lightning channels, since they need to be connected to L1, and that takes a lot of time. And yeah, so there are these limitations. How can we solve them? And don't you think that these give trustodial wallets such as Spark and Ark a use case, considering the fact that the user knows of their limitations? For example, I used the wallet of Satoshi. I know that it is not something that I can hold a large sum of money on. With these caveats, people can use them and start receiving funds, but when they have larger amounts, they can upgrade and upskill, learn new things, and then migrate to new solutions.
Right. So that goes back to, appealing to those pain points. So that those are very real pain points that Lightning inherits from the chain. So an L2, and now Lightning is the only L2, but let's say there was another L2. Okay. Bitcoin is very unique because it's decentralized, it's proof of work, it's always online. And when you're receiving a Bitcoin payment, there's no interactivity required. The sender is broadcasting to the broader network. The network is always online. So you don't have to be online because you're just, they're signing something over to you. An L2, there's inherent interactivity required. So you need to be able to claim something that's sent to you. And that's where a lot of the problems with Lightning are made worse by mobile nodes. I've been on record a long time saying a lot of the stupidity that happens in Lightning is because people have pushed this idea that you can run a Lightning node on your phone. Like a Lightning node on your phone, there's a number of problems with that. One is that, like you said, the channel costs. It is not practical to rent liquidity or incur the chain cost to connect one device. Like I personally have 2 different phones. I have multiple laptops. Like, am I going to open a channel to each one of those devices? That's just stupid, right? So that incurs the cost. And then if you have the thing on your phone, you're not actually, to your point about not a lot of people on Lightning, if it's on your phone, all you're ever doing is incurring cost. You're not running a business. You're not selling something. You're not routing. You're not getting any of those costs back. So you're incurring a lot of cost just to power one device, but you're not making anything back because it's not earning you money while you sleep, either for your business, just routing. You could, if you did have a node, you could share it with friends and family that maybe don't care about the self-custody stuff. Like, there's going to be trust because, and we'll get to the scaling thing, but we should localize that trust, right? That we need to scale to billions of users thing is complete misdirection. That's emotional blackmail. That it's a very kind of leftist tactic that people use. Like, do you not care about poor people because you don't want 8 billion people? So Bitcoin scalability is not transaction bound. That's the interesting thing with the supply. So if you look at Bitcoin scalability in terms of transactions, Lightning already scales transactions infinitely. You and I could pay each other 1,000,000 times today. That's infinitely scaled transactions. The limitation is how many people are there on the planet? How much Bitcoin is there? What are the fees? All right, so right now the fees are as close to zero as they're ever going to get. We have subsat transaction fees, but there is still a dust minimum. So when you look at the large accumulators, you got like the MicroStrategies, the BlackRocks, Lost Coins, taking up a significant amount of the supply. So all of a sudden, your 21 million supply is down to realistically 10, 15 million. Divide that like 15 million Bitcoins across 8 billion people. Like, people aren't even going to have dust. So if you cannot afford to transact on the chain to get the security, you're not using Bitcoin, you're trusting somebody. And that's fine. Like, that's inevitable. Because realistically, when you look at supply distribution, we're never going to scale past 200 million people. Maybe there's things that could be done to the dust limit, maybe to get it down a little bit, but realistically, it's 200, maybe 500 million if I'm off by like an order of magnitude, are ever going to be able to use Bitcoin. If you cannot afford to unilaterally exit, which means having an amount of Bitcoin where the dust is not cost prohibitive. People could have more sats than the dust, but if the dust-based fee is like 20% of your net worth, you're not going to transact in Bitcoin. You're going to trust someone. So my project is about distributing the trust. I would rather someone trust you, like your family. You run a node. Your friends and family, people you share a house with, people you share a refrigerator or a car with, they should trust you, not a centralized entity. So there is no way to solve that scaling problem without trust. Trust needs to be decentralized and distributed to solve that issue. And again, to your point of cost, if you have a VPS, you can get a VPS, like you got a hardware issue, you can get a VPS with a trusted execution environment for a couple dollars per month. And if it was always online, and you only had one, maybe two channels, your friends and family used it, you used it for your business, that cost is negligible. And that scales. There's only 200 million businesses on the globe. And in terms of households, people you share a house with, people you share a car with already, if you share a node with that, there's only like 1 billion households, and even less than that if you count people that are actually on the internet. There's not 8 billion people on the internet even, so we don't have to talk about scaling Bitcoin there. And why do people not use even layer one at numbers that we'd expect? Most people don't have money to save. So that's kind of where this means of exchange thing comes in. We need to worry less about having them convert their savings to Bitcoin because they don't have any savings. They're excluded from the economy altogether. We need to give them a permissionless way to earn. And Lightning facilitates that because you can have a small community, a small business, where the trust is already implied in the meat space, can spin up my product, for example, Lightning.Pub, and everybody has their wallets connect to it. They have it connect to an e-commerce site, things of that nature. That is the way that you scale, is by localizing trust. And that's an admission that trust is inevitable because there's literally not enough Bitcoin for everybody to use it.
Yeah, that's a good place to move into your own products, such as Lightning.Pub and ShockWallet. Would you let us know about them and how they kind of solve this scalability with actually some trust that is localized instead of being this trust being in something like Wallet of Satoshi or Spark operators?
Right. Yeah, so it really comes down to decentralization versus centralization, and everything stupid in Lightning is because people have pushed mobile nodes. Like, you don't run an email server on your phone because then you wouldn't receive emails when you sleep. Same thing with Lightning. So with Lightning.Pub, what we've done is, we've accepted reality. Okay. And the reality being that not everybody is going to run infrastructure, not everybody can afford to run infrastructure, that there is going to be some trust and centralization to scale, but we keep that local. So what Lightning.Pub does is, with one line of code, it's just literally a one-line script, it'll set up a Lightning node in less than a minute. If you go to my socials, you can see a demo I just did in Mexico. Where the one line, it downloads LND, it spins up the platform, and it spits out a Nostr profile. We can get kind of into how Nostr ties into all this. So within 1 minute, you can have a Lightning node stood up, and you can give that end profile. You can plug that into your phone, your laptop, to have one wallet synced. You can send it to family to connect their wallet. Within 2 minutes, you can have your whole family on a Lightning node that you host. That doesn't have to necessarily be hardware in your house. It could be a VPS, but it could be a Raspberry Pi. It could be an old laptop running Linux. Lightning nodes are very light. They don't require a full Bitcoin node because you can just download compact blocks from the network in a trustless way that kind of preserves privacy. So that would be the way to scale, is not to get a channel open to every device, but to get a channel to every home or every small business where meat space trust is already implied. And that's kind of the vision with those.
And where does Nostr come into the picture? It is for transmitting the information that this Lightning wallet is going to transfer this amount, or is it through the DMs that you get encrypted messages or encrypted seed words?
Yeah, so it uses the DM encryption spec to do communication. So we get into like mobile nodes. Like the thing with mobile nodes is, like, the idea is that you just go to an app store and you download something and it's done, right? Whereas historically, with a full Lightning node, particularly if you want to share it or connect it to e-commerce, you have to do all that traditional server type stuff. Like, you have to have a domain. You have to point that domain to a reverse proxy for SSL. If that node's in your home, you have to have a configuration in your firewall and your router and all these sort of things. That's some pretty complicated setup. That's not a casual setup. Things like the SSL certificate, the static IP4 address, actually, that's something else you would need with your firewall, or you have to put it in a VPS. Those are things that have been worked around with Tor, which, if you followed my post, I would never advocate anybody running Tor. All it does is make your Lightning node unreliable, because you're bouncing all that traffic potentially all over the globe. So that makes it slow, because there's multiple hops involved. So you could be going from the US to India to Europe and back again before the packet even gets there. And if there's a hiccup anywhere along the way, the packet just doesn't make it, it doesn't work. So anybody that's tried to run like a Lightning node for business behind Tor has had to give up on that. That is just not going to work. Nostr, on the other hand, is literally just a web server that anybody can run a relay. That's very trivial to set up. You don't even need the SSL piece because it's encrypted already with the messages. So this Lightning node, it connects to a relay. It's our relay by default. It could be your own, could be your buddy's. But you don't have to trust that relay at all because all the comms are encrypted and all the comms are signed, right? So when you put an N profile, a Nostr profile, that encodes a public key and a relay. And that is how your wallet can talk to your node. And your node never needed any of that fancy setup. You didn't need to have an SSL domain or firewall or any of that thing because it's just punching out to the relay. And because it's just a web server, there's not all kinds of hops. It's as reliable as anything else on the internet. There's no failure probability and latency increase over a traditional website. The other nice thing about that is it makes it really easy to plug Lightning into the web at large. So like with Tor, people would need to use a Tor browser to access your e-commerce site, right? Because your node is behind that. That's not the case with Nostr. It's just JavaScript, JSON, and WebSockets. That's the stuff the web uses anyway. So you can plug an N profile into any website and start passing invoices to that. So what we've done is we've eliminated 90% of the friction of setting up a real Lightning node, not just an app that's really nerfed, so that you can actually start using it to generate revenue and not just cost to tinker with it. Like with Phoenix, you're paying a lot of cost just to tinker with Lightning. You're not benefiting from it in any way. There's an incentive problem. And that's what we're trying to move the needle on, is make it easy to set up a node that actually earns you revenue so you can use it for your business, so you can onboard friends and family, help their businesses get bootstrapped. That's really what Lightning needs to be. And then Nostr, further helps that by plugging it into the web. So if we want Lightning or Bitcoin generally to be the payments rail of the web, we need to treat it accordingly. We need to get it into the web browser, and that's what Nostr allows us to do.
Point you raised about Tor was interesting. I have run into issues running Lightning behind Tor, and it's taking for example, like even on Phoenix Wallet, which is not as complicated as a self hosted node, there were times that I had to just turn it off. But there are concerns about using the ClearNet because of privacy concerns. So that is only solved by Nostr, or even with ClearNet, you have some levels of privacy?
So really the only thing you're leaking with using ClearNet would be the IP address of, let's say if you're running the Lightning node at your house, your IP address for that node would be, people could see that, even if it changes a lot. They could get an idea of your geography, so they might know the state or maybe the city you're in, potentially. So people mostly use Tor to get around the networking issues. There's other ways to solve that. A VPS, I think, is the best option for most people because they're only a couple dollars a month. They're always online. They're in a data center. So if you're concerned with your IP address leaking, Nostr doesn't solve that. Nostr is doing the communication for the invoices to the web, but your Lightning node underneath will still be communicating with its IP address. So if you're concerned about using your residential IP address to connect to the Lightning network, which I would argue is, you're kind of worrying about the wrong thing, because nobody can really get your address from that. The intelligence agencies are going to get it anyway. through the ISPs. Tor, you're just getting yourself put on a watch list, right? Because Tor is a Sybil-owned thing by like the CIA anyway. But if you're really concerned about the public getting your home IP address, you can use a VPS. You could do things like a reverse SSH tunnel that doesn't require any software. There's other things like Tailscale and stuff like that. They kind of have some of the complications of Tor in setup. You could also do that with a VPS if you don't want to have your Lightning node on the cloud, but you don't want your IP. You could have your home Lightning node tunnel out through a VPS to mask its IP. You could do a regular VPN. Regular VPN's kind of a standard way you could do that. So there's a lot of ways to deal with the privacy issue. But Tor is not one of them, because what's the point of the privacy if your Lightning node doesn't work?
Yeah, that's a fair point. And about the lighter implementations of a node or using Neutrino, what options do we have to set up a Lightning node in a few minutes without having to wait for the full blockchain to download? And what considerations do we need to take into consideration when doing that?
Yeah, so Neutrino, that's our default mode, and that only that's what takes like 1 minute to sync those headers before the node spins up. So what that does is that goes out to the broader network. It works sort of like Electrum, like there's like a process verification, but it's more private because your Lightning node doesn't have to get specific transaction information. It gets kind of like the whole context of the block, and then it can find what it needs. So you're not doxing your UTXOs when you're using Neutrino. It's not fully validating like running a full Bitcoin core node, but you can also source from multiple different nodes. You can prefer, let's say, Blockstream's node or my node or anybody that's running a full Bitcoin Core or BTCD node. You can point it to any one of those or multiple of those, and LND is just going to handle making sure that the block filters all kind of match. So the trust level on that is not really concerned. Any kind of attack with that would have to be really sophisticated anyway. And again, with Lightning, it's a hot wallet, right? So all hot wallet asterisks apply. You're not going to put your life savings on anything connected to the internet. So, these are all trade-offs that you have to make versus cold storage. Anything that's not cold storage is inherently less secure than cold storage, but that's your different trade-offs that you're making to either earn revenue or have a hot wallet for spending. It's not really any different than having a mobile on-chain wallet. You have an on-chain wallet on your phone. You're doing the same things. You're doing those kind of SPV type things, and then you're connected to the internet, so maybe other software on your phone is a risk. Hot wallet risk obviously apply to anything that's not cold storage.
Just before hitting the record button, I realized that you had an involvement in the project Gun, which is a predecessor to Nostr. Let us know about that and how Nostr was born, and more about your communications with Fiat Jaff. And also, I would like to know how Nostr changes the future of the web and also Bitcoin development.
Sure. Yeah. So for people that don't know, Gun, very similar to Nostr. It used WebSocket-based relays, just like a Nostr relay. Your identity was key-based. You could send encrypted and signed messages through that relay such that the relay was trustless. The issue I had with it, and the biggest difference between it and Nostr, was Gun is also a database. So Nostr relays aren't so much a database. They have very simple fields that are, can be indexed in a very efficient, like, key value database. Gun was more of a graph, so that kind of made it slow. If you go back to my socials from like 2000 or 2020 rather, before Nostr was created, I was doing the same things that Nostr is doing today. I had like a Twitter-like social feed where you could zap posts, and that was all going through Gun. So Fiat Joff and I were acquainted just because of Lightning. The original ShockWallet was one of the first wallets, maybe the first, to implement multiple LN URL specs. And I had shared with him in a Telegram, just DMs, kind of where I was going with this. But explaining that the gun replication across relays and the performance was not very good because of that database thing. And it was shortly after that he published the first Nostr that was basically gun without the database, and that makes it obviously much faster. And because there's not these assumptions around a database, you could have much more scalable relays. So basically, the whole Nostr network right now runs off something called stir fry, which someone just made a really efficient C compiled relay that uses a very simple key value database. And that's what enabled it to scale. And that was what I was always afraid of with Gun, is that it wouldn't scale because of the performance. Nostr just kind of simplified a bunch of fields, made that so it's performant, and it's really primitive. It's just like JSON and WebSockets, right? So anybody could write different ways to use those things. That's what the nips are. So if you go to the Nostr nips repo, it's just defining what the JSON looks like. Is it this kind number? Is there a tag for this? So that's really all the Nostr protocol is like defining how to use JSON and WebSockets. And that's, we use it not primarily for social. We're using it to solve that connecting devices across the web without SSL. So like if you want to, again, like connect your phone to your node or connect your smart TV to your refrigerator, that typically today would be done with a central service or like a turn service, and that creates like a channel for data to go back and forth. But with Nostr, you have persistent identity keys. So your refrigerator can have its own public key. You know that you're communicating with your refrigerator, and you can determine which relay you're using for that. So it's not peer-to-peer, it's client to server, but it acts like it's peer-to-peer. It's kind of the best of both worlds. You get client to server performance, but you get peer-to-peer identity and trustlessness. And that is a big unlock. I was talking to another founder who's doing some stuff with attesting documents like in elections, right? And it occurred to him, like, holy shit, like the voting machines could have their own public key and are signing their messages, and then things could be time stamped. Like this is just very simple things that have never been combined. And it creates like a whole different kind of, you call it Internet of Things or something like that, with more peer-to-peer like properties, but not sacrifice that centralized application performance and reliability.
How can Bitcoin development change? You have already started using that as a kind of communication layer.
I don't think it'll change Bitcoin development itself, but for connecting Bitcoin to the web, like for those of us who have the goal of making Bitcoin the money of the internet, it makes it very easy to connect things to web apps. So I think as we published a protocol for this, some people might be familiar with NWC as a way to connect.
Nostr Wallet Connect.
Yeah, so you can connect like a wallet to an Albi hub. And that, again, that was derivative of what we were doing with Lightning.Pub. Like the Albi guys reached out to me from Lightning when I had Lightning.Video, was getting some traction, trying to get me to support the browser extension. I'm like, that doesn't make it, like, we cannot distribute a browser extension. Browser extensions do not work on mobile. They're extra friction for people to set up. These things need to work within the JavaScript itself. And at that time, I had Lightning.Pub and ShockWallet using Nostr to connect to each other. They did their own thing with NWC, but they didn't consider what I was considering, which was things like ad hoc payments, where you just have a static code that's sort of like a BOLT12 offer. We can shit on BOLT12 if you want to. So yeah, you can put an end profile string. It's called an end offer instead of end profile. And Stacker News actually already integrated this. You can put that in to any web app, and then that app can use that to pull invoices and pay your node. We also have the invoice, which is more like NWC, where an app can send a request. It sends that over Nostr. You either approve or deny. You can set a budget, and that would give that app access to your wallet. So, yeah, Nostr has been great for, and actually we can tie these things into NIPO5 too, where you just put a Lightning address in, like your NIPO5 address. The app can look up your end offer and your end debit and send the appropriate communications just by you typing in a user at domain. That protocol, we actually just launched that, and we announced that in Mexico like a month ago. If you go to clinkme.dev, there's a demo there, and you can look at the specs. And we have an SDK that's very simple to implement. You can also test it on Stacker News. They integrated it recently. So it offers you the best of NWC, BOLT12, LNURL, with really none of the downsides. Like there's none of the SSL stuff like we were talking about with LNURL. BOLT12 is basically Tor on Lightning, so it's very unreliable because you get the hops and the latency. BOLT12. We also did the privacy feature of BOLT12. A lot of people were talking about BOLT12 from a privacy standpoint, but that was misdirection because blinded paths exist outside of BOLT12. So you can use Clink static offers with blinded paths on LND today with Clink. And then NWC, it has facility for ad hoc payments. And then in Lightning.Pub, we have things like callbacks and arbitrary data that can go into that. So your Lightning node, let's say you're selling t-shirts, the Nostr offer could say, what size t-shirt do you want? And then the app would provide that over Nostr. Your Lightning node would kick that back to your fulfillment application. So Clink uses Nostr to connect to Lightning nodes in a way that is designed for basically e-commerce on the web.
How are you trying to solve the problems that we are facing with Lightning today? And talk more about your Lightning.Pub and ShockWallet in more detail, how one sets that up using a VPS. And you also touched on the fact that you can be the local point of trust that other members of the family or the neighborhood can trust on, and you can give access to them. It's what explained in your video. Let us know more about the unique qualities of your products and also about Lightning.Video, which I had a quick look at. I have already used Zapstream. Zapstream came after Nostr. You had this one before Nostr, so it reminds me of something like Fountain that later you integrated with Nostr. Yeah, so I'm curious to know about them.
Yeah, so Lightning.Video came about. So I mentioned the original ShockWallet trying to be a decentralized WeChat. And implied with that is that like, if you're selling products on the internet, you have pictures, you have demo videos, you have rich media is part of the internet. And there was not a service or tool to handle that. So we had Gun to do, to pass the Lightning data. We obviously have Lightning as the monetary layer. We needed basically a media host. Now, this was like 2020, 21 or so. This was a part-time thing for me. I still had like my full-time fiat job. Everybody in the world was building Lightning wallets then. I was like, you know what? I don't need to add just another Lightning wallet here. I'm going to zig while everybody else adds, and I'm going to build the media solution that I would need anyway. Like I need a way to host images and video. So I just started focusing on that. That's, Lightning.Video stood that up. It demonstrated a use case for Lightning that is still really strong. The micro paywalls have a lot of value, like, so paying $20 a month or $10 a month or whatever for Netflix when you might watch it once or twice a month doesn't make a lot of sense. You should be able to pay $1 or something, or you should have a video that's free, maybe on YouTube, but you want to monetize that with a digital product. Let's say you can watch the last 3 minutes of this video where I reveal a secret, and you send them to your Lightning video channel, and then they can pay like 25 cents to watch the end of it. So it gives a way to turn videos into digital products. That's a great blend of the rich media and the Lightning use case. That got us into Wolf, which was the Lightning accelerator. That's when I was finally able to go full time. So Lightning.Video was successful because now it allowed me to work on this full time. It proved that we could find use cases. Another use case of Lightning.Video was privacy. Because Lightning is so private, I didn't set out to build an adult website, but that got a lot of traction. It was like 90% of the revenue was coming through adult channels, right? So where people that are on OnlyFans or something could send people to Lightning.Video for, to earn sats, and then the consumers of that, it wasn't showing up on their credit card as like OnlyFans, right? So privacy, small payment, paywalls, great use case for Lightning, great use case for Lightning.Video. That hasn't been our priority for the last couple of years because the limitation with adoption is Lightning tooling in general. So Lightning.Video is like still custodial. Obviously, there was like regulatory threats with that. Don't want to lean into that too hard. The creators, weren't earning permissionlessly, so it was better than the banking system, but by how much, right? Like if we're the central point of failure, they can't really rely on generating an income where there's still a central point of failure. They can't earn permissionlessly. So we had to step back. We saw that Lightning is not really moving forward. It's actually moved backwards. There used to be a lot of good wallets that connected to a remote node. Zeus, Blue Wallet, I think, some other interfaces for like Ellen Bits. This was like the consensus way to do things in like 2020, 2021. And then at some point, the whole mobile node thing came in because you had salespeople, right? Like you had to fund your Lightning development. Like Phoenix, they do a pretty good job with automation to get a mobile node to at least work for spending. But that's really just a sales interface for their LSP. Like you have a lot of people complain about Lightning being centralized because of LSPs. Well, Lightning's not centralized because of LSPs. You're just using a product that's trying to sell the service of a specific LSP. So again, this comes down to like everything that's dumb in Lightning is dumb because people pushed mobile nodes. We stepped back with ShockWallet and Lightning.Pub to bridge the gap of friction. So like if you go to Lightning.Pub right now, you get to the landing page, it shows you a one-line string. You can paste that into a VPS. You can go to like Hexmir or something or low-end box, and you can get a VPS for $2 to $3 a month. There's even a couple other ones that might be like $10 a year for a VPS. It doesn't need to be much, like 2 gigs of RAM, 20 gigs of storage is more than enough to run L&D. You get into the terminal of that, you paste the line, boop, 1 minute goes by, you get an end profile. You can paste that end profile into your phone. You can manage that node from your phone with ShockWallet. You can share that end profile. Your friends and family, they get their own account with ShockWallet. You can take the end offer from ShockWallet, plug it into Stacker News or some other tools that will be coming for e-commerce, including Lightning.Video, and have non-custodial revenue machine. You can think of it like maybe BTC Pay Server, I think is probably the most popular full node for businesses, like people that are actually serious in generating revenue. They run BTC Pay Server right now. But BTC Pay Server has all those setup issues, the SSL certificate, the IP4, all those kind of things. So we want to give everybody the benefit of something like a BTC Pay Server. I think we can make it more powerful, if we focus on that. But yeah, give people the leverage of something like a BTC Pay Server that they can set up in less than a minute. That is very lean, very, very simple to share. And that once we have that, it becomes much more viable to create applications like decentralized eBay, decentralized Shopify, and using Nostr for all that. So this merging of Lightning and Nostr is how we can re-architect the web in web apps, and things need to be web-based, right? Like nobody uses anything unless it's available in the browser. You don't have to have people downloading Tor browser or some other peer-to-peer based thing. You can just load it in a website. And once we get to that and connect Lightning to the websites, then we can really start to experience Lightning as a means of exchange and the native money of the internet.
I am in the early stages of my learning experience with self-hosting your data. I have had a Bitcoin node before that, and at the time I am challenging with the broken hardware on which I had my Bitcoin node. This idea is very attractive. The moment I have some time on my hand and some calm days, I would get into setting up your implementation, give that a try. And that's really interesting. I know the limitations of a VPS. A VPS is not like your own node. They might be able to discover something about you, but as you said, well, if it is the law enforcement, they will have access to it anyway. But the problem with a self-hosted node is that it takes space. It has to be plugged to the electricity. If the electricity goes out, it will shut down. Then it will not come back on automatically. Maybe there are solutions for that. As I said, I am in the early stages of my learning. So VPS makes a lot of sense, especially when it is at such a low cost, $10 for a year. That's really interesting if that's possible, or even $4 a month is interesting. And one question also regarding that is, any Debian based operating system works, or does it have to be Ubuntu?
Any Debian based or Arch or Fedora, those are what we've tested. Those are what we tested. It will run if you want to do a manual installation. You can run it on anything. You can run it on Mac. You can run it on Windows. Subsystem for Linux is actually pretty straightforward. We are packaging it for Start9 and Umbral. That there's a little bit of more work we want to do before that, because once we publish it to those, that'll be a shit ton of downloads, and we'll end up doing support and never getting anything done development wise. So we're pumping the brakes on getting it to Start9 and Umbral, but that will be coming. To your point about being always online and electricity, that is why I tend to recommend old laptops. So people can usually find an old laptop for like $100, and that has a battery built into it. So a lot of people don't know this with a Lightning Daemon though, but if like your power goes out while your Lightning node is running, you risk corrupting your channel state. A laptop, if your power goes out, will shut down gracefully. You don't have to worry about that. So a used laptop, like an old laptop that you just throw Ubuntu or something on, is ideal for self-hosting in the home. If you do get like a Start9 appliance or like a mini PC, I would recommend getting like just a cheap battery that will kind of buffer a couple minutes here and there, and it can maybe even send a shutdown signal. But if you don't want to deal with anything like that, and you're not worried about VPSs, like a VPSs, you got to keep in mind these data centers, these people that run these, they are running applications for some of the biggest companies in the world. They have trillions of dollars in application logic running on their hardware. Your Lightning node with maybe a couple $1,000s in sats is not really going to be a high risk target. But if you want to self-host, that's good too. Use an old laptop. You'll go down if your internet goes down, but if you really need, how often does that happen in a year? And if you're really worried about it, you could have a router that falls back to 4G or Starlink or something like that. So actually here in my house, I have Starlink because my fiber internet goes down a couple times a year with weather. My house electricity goes down a lot because I live in a wooded area with shitty weather like 6 months of the year. But I get data center level reliability with just a simple battery that keeps things up and a router that falls back to Starlink. I am up as often as a data center for basically a couple $100. Starlink costs $10 a month for a backup plan. So as long as you've got a router that can handle your fiber or cable and fall back to Starlink, you're at 5 nines reliability, just like a data center. So there's ways to deal with these individual problems. Just a regular old laptop with no backup internet, you're still going to be up 5 9 of the year in most cases. So different solutions for different problems. Fake L2s solve none of these. You're just they could be up, they could be in a data center, but you're trusting them. So you might as well have just either used custodial, and they're, to the extent that you might not absorb a channel cost right initially, you're just deferring that because you can't unilaterally exit without incurring that cost anyway. So you're going to incur the same, if you want the security benefits of non-custodiality, you need to invoke the chain. Invoking the chain always has a cost. So it's just a matter of when you incur that cost. With a Lightning channel, you're incurring it up front. With a fake L2, you might incur it later. And until you incur it, you're probably going to be trusting them, given like Lightning flows and Lightning being an open network. So there are no solutions, only trade-offs. I call fake L2s scams because they claim to be solutions when the solution was always trust and centralization in the first place. So if we're going to have trust and centralization, let's distribute that to the extremes. Let's distribute that to the household, to the small business.
I already have a kind of router that connects to my router, so works as a kind of VPN. It helps me set the DNS, fix the DNS, even when I move to other places, as long as I am connected to that. And I think with that, I have the possibility of hooking it up with Starlink if I am willing to, and I can source both internet connections, the one that I get from a local ISP and Starlink, and when one at the same time I can use both of them. And also if my own local ISP fails, then Starlink is most probably up. So it solves that. What I wanted to know, the danger with Lightning channels and the risk of electricity cut. When the electricity goes out, you shouldn't only secure the device that it needs to be connected to the electricity, but the internet should be provided too. If you are not connected to the internet, you are open to the same risks.
Not quite the same. So like if electricity goes out while your node is running, you could corrupt your local channel state.
Oh, right.
So, and that necessitates a recovery, and the recovery closes your channels. So you're basically going to have to rebuild your Lightning node from scratch if that happens. That doesn't always happen when electricity gets pulled. Like your electronics, if they have capacitors, a decent computer will probably flush out of the capacitors to the disk, and you'll probably be fine. But that's not always the case. If your hardware goes down while it's actively writing to the disk, and a capacitor doesn't bail you out, yeah, you could corrupt your node's database, and then you have to do that recovery process, which closes all your channels. Now, if your internet goes down, this gets back to all L2s are necessarily interactive, because you're interacting with another party, and to make sure that they don't cheat you, you have to be online to defend your claim. So there is some delay time. It's not like the second you go down, your channel partner can rug you. And that's what's great about Lightning actually, is that they have an incentive not to rug you, because there's a time delay in which if you do come back online and your node discovers they tried to rug you, they could lose everything. So that is the beautiful part of Lightning's incentives, is that one, it incentivizes you to be online, and that's what makes the network reliable. And then it disincentivizes attackers, because any attacker that tries and fails, they don't just fail at the attack, they lose anything that was on their side of that channel. This is another reason why fake L2s are pushing covenants, in my opinion, is because one of the claimed use cases for covenants is that you can get rid of that, and that's an attack on Lightning, right? We don't want to remove the disincentive for attackers, and we don't want to remove the incentive that keeps the network reliable by encouraging people to be online. So that kind of ties in with their Lightning Fund being fake Lightning wallets. Is, hey, if we get covenants, that helps with interactivity, and hey, we can upgrade Lightning with it. We're not attacking Lightning. We want Lightning to be better. Well, removing the intact disincentive and removing the reliability incentive is very clearly an attack on Lightning.
What are your thoughts about the future updates or soft forks in Bitcoin? You just mentioned that one that I mean that I infer that you are not in line with you are not very much sympathetic to activating covenants. So what innovations do you think are necessary, or do you think that everything can be done on the current state of Bitcoin and we do not need any future soft forks?
Let's define everything, right? So let's look at what Bitcoin is and what it could be. Bitcoin is hard money. It's decentralized, permissionless, trustless. It does that very well today. It's built its market value on that. It has liberated anybody who decides to be liberated from fiat rat race. Like, you don't have to go invest in stocks or shiny rocks to protect your savings. Bitcoin has already put in check central banks, right? So you don't have to save your wealth in anything. You don't have to go risk your wealth to preserve your purchasing power. Bitcoin has already solved that problem. It has already liberated mankind by giving them a neutral asset. And it's absorbing a lot of the printing that's happened that would otherwise have gone into houses and stocks and ribeyes, right? Like, it's a battery for fiat. So it does that. It does that well. What it could do, and what people say Bitcoin needs to do, is become an application stack. And this is where, this is where I get into why covenants are pointless, because Bitcoin is not an application stack. Ethereum is an application stack. Ethereum is a place where you can build an application that does all kinds of things. It makes a lot of trade-offs to achieve that, namely trust and centralization. Like, Ethereum's is not, nodes are not distributed. Proof of stake is no different than a shareholder agreement in a centralized company. Like, it might as well be JP Morgan chain. So Bitcoin as an application stack, it just lacks imagination. It makes sense to have applications that use Bitcoin as money, but Bitcoin shouldn't conflate its concerns as being part of that application stack, because then you start to risk what it is as money. Like, Bitcoin is, if it's not money, if it starts prioritizing things that are beyond it being money, that presents an existential risk to the chain, whether that's in terms of node centralization. Like, if nodes get too bloated, there's less of them, that's not good. If you have a lot of users captured in centralized closed networks, like an Ark, that starts to skew the incentives of miners. I think, like, if we got covenants, you'd probably see hash rate decline substantially some years out from now, because now it's really going to be going straight to the hitting the security budget when you're just rotating VTXOs, basically, where people never exit. So you start looking at these applications as a roach motel, where Bitcoin leaves the open network and gets caught up into closed networks. And once those closed networks reach a certain scale, the incentives start to get perverted a little bit. So the reason I'm not in favor of any, and that's not to say I would never support any change, but the narrative for changes, at least in the last few years, has been to make Bitcoin an application stack, and that is absolutely not something we want to entertain. That you can get into slippery slope fallacies, these incentive things I'm talking about. But Bitcoin is money, not an application stack. So that should never be confused. Scaling, I already mentioned, is ownership bound, is not throughput bound. Lightning is already infinitely reusable transactions. The only limit on how many people can use Bitcoin is how many people can afford a unilateral exit. And that is well under 1 billion people, probably 2 to 500 million based on my ballpark napkin math. And I think that's actually likely to get less as more people pile into things like ETFs, as MicroStrategy acquires things. And that's because Bitcoin is really a store of value. So, but we can already help the 8 billion people by letting them earn Bitcoin. They don't have any money to save, but we can let them start earning revenue across borders permissionlessly without middlemen through Lightning, and making sure that Lightning is distributed to those local community, household, neighborhood extremes, small business extremes. Then you build applications on that. Like if you want an application that uses Bitcoin as money, connect to nodes with Nostr. Problem solved.
Something that I'd like to get into, especially when you brought up the point about fake L2s claiming to be solving the problems that Lightning currently has, but they don't solve anything. Cashu has been open. I mean, Callie has been very open about the fact that it is not a layer. It is because it is not trustless like Lightning, and he says that Lightning is a true layer that is built on top of Bitcoin. What are your thoughts about innovations such as Cashu with all kinds of limitations that it has, such as double spend?
So Cashu is in some ways similar to what I build. Cashu, I think, is largely using Nostr for communications. So they saw what we were doing with Nostr. They leveraged that, which is good. It allows people to share nodes with friends and family, which is good. Cashu itself, though, or eCash generally, I'm not a fan of. It's not more where it gets traction is I call privacy LARP. Okay, so the eCash, if we're connected to the same mint, right? The mint wouldn't see us transact or wouldn't know who we are transacting with each other, is one of the alleged use cases. Now, that assumes a very large anonymity set, because if we're the only 2 users on the thing, or if we're 2 out of 6 users, that doesn't mean a whole lot. So the privacy advantage of Cashu only comes with scale. And we don't want to scale custodians. We want to make custodians small. So that's a difference between Cashu and Lightning.Pub, is that I want trusted custodians to be at the family level, whereas the privacy claims of Cashu are more at the bank level. So, because you need that anonymity set. And then again, that privacy implication is only within the mint, because now the mint is a closed network. If you want to actually transact with the broader world, that mint has to do a swap for you. So now these mints become a kind of a surveillance choke point where they see every transaction in and out on the Lightning Network. And there's all kinds of correlation attacks that can be done with that. So if you actually value privacy, you need to run your own Lightning node. There's there's nothing more private than running your own Lightning node. So it doesn't make sense from a privacy standpoint, at least not until you're talking about large custodians. But then again, that's a choke point because they're doing swaps. And Cashu is what really drives me nuts about Cashu is like the people that tried to call it self-custodial. Like there was one of the mutiny guys. eCash is self-custodial. What are you self-custodying? You're self-custodying custody of what's effectively an API key. Our API key is an API key to Coinbase self-custodial? No, that's absolute nonsense. So it's a server authentication method. You use the eCash token to redeem something at a server. That has all the negative trade-offs of self-custody, because you could lose your tokens, like your device or something like that. You're taking self-custody risk, but you don't get the self-custody benefit of it actually being not self-custodial. So Lightning.Pub does not use eCash. It uses just Nostr keys as accounts. Now, Nostr keys can be just as private as the eCash from the standpoint of the pub doesn't know who you are. It's just a randomly generated key. It's not tied to your social Nostr profile, as we use a key ring that abstracts that. So you can have 50 different accounts on the same pub. That's no different than 50 different eCash tokens that were minted at different times. I mean, I don't like to dunk on software implementations itself. There will be bugs in my stuff. Anything exposed to the internet is going to get compromised at some point. But they're not even really taking care of like low-hanging fruit. There was one instance where I said that they could tweak the tokens to identify them. Super Testnet demonstrated that. They had to fix that. There's this new thing going on with arbitrary data. There's some Bitcoin knots people in Cali going back and forth because Cali's anti-knots, and they put a bunch of arbitrary data on mints. They found an exploit for that. It was all very ridiculous things going on that these kind of abstractions open up. So I can get why people were fooled by it, but when you think about it, it just doesn't make any sense. That's kind of where I'm at on eCash.
I'm very curious and excited to run an instance of your Lightning.Pub ShockWallet app because of the very little requirements that it has, and maybe even as soon as as early as the next 10 days, I would get down to it and give it a try to see how it works. And the idea is really great, and it actually solves some of my own problems. Yeah, Justin, thank you so much for all the information. I really enjoyed this chat. And how can people follow your work?
So all of our stuff is open source on GitHub. You can get links to that, Twitter, Telegram, Nostr, at shock.network. Or if you want to go straight to the Lightning.Pub landing page, that's Lightning.Pub. And Lightning.Pub, again, the interface for that is ShockWallet.app. So if you decide to try those out, it's still early phases. Like I said, I'm not shipping this stuff to the appliances yet because small UI things kind of confuse people. That's the kind of stuff we're working through. But yeah, if you want to give those a try, please send feedback. I'm always providing direct support in Telegram or Stacker News or things like that. Just feel free to reach out, and we usually get bug fixes out pretty quick. Lightning.Pub we've been using Lightning.Pub behind Lightning.Video for years now, so it's gotten fairly hard from a security standpoint. It's mostly just small UX issues, but we'd be happy to work through any of those with you if you decide to give it a try.
Thank you very much, Justin, and a big thank you to everyone who stayed with us till the end. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel and give the video a like. It really helps. If you're tuning in on a podcast app, I'd love it if you could leave a review, especially on Apple Podcasts. It goes a long way in helping more people find the show. You can also support me by listening on Podcasting 2.0 apps like Fountain or Breeze, and streaming me some sats while you listen. Feel free to zap me and follow me on Nostr too. If you'd like to send a Lightning donation, just scan the QR code or visit my Linktree. The link is in the description. You'll find more ways to support or follow my work there.